I was born during the Second World War. My dad was in the Army. He was stationed in California before he went overseas, and so I was born in Riverside. And don't remember much about that, obviously. My family was from Mississippi. Mother's family was from Jackson, and my dad was from a place called Shibuda, Mississippi. My grandfather was W.F. Bond, who was the state superintendent of education in Mississippi for about 30 years. And my other grandfather I never knew. He predeceased my coming into the world, so I didn't get to know him much, but Mississippi was my ancestral home. My dad worked for the J.C. Penney Company, and as a result he moved around. He had started before the war in the stockroom and eventually worked his way up to becoming an assistant manager and a manager, and they moved him around a lot in those days. And I went to I think 3 or 4 schools in the first grade because we moved to a bunch of different places, but we were in North Carolina, Florida twice. They finally moved him to Alexandria, Louisiana when I was in the 3rd grade, and he told them at the time that he was not going to move anymore, that was it. He was going to stay here, and we did. I went to grade school at David F. Huddle on Texas Avenue, which made one of the first couple of years that it was open, I think. After spending 1 year at Rugg, and yeah, finished at Huddle, then went to Bolton High School. That was in the days when you went to Bolton in the 8th grade. They didn't have any middle schools. There were a couple of teachers at Bolton that had a big influence, I think. All English teachers. Julia Lewis in the early grades, and Maddie White, who was Paul White's sister, maybe, and then a senior English teacher that really had a profound influence, I think, on everybody, named Inez Parker, who was just an extraordinary woman and teacher and demanded a lot and taught us a lot and made learning fun. A number of my friends were going to SMU, and I really kind of thought maybe I was going to go to SMU. Another one of my friends was going to Dartmouth, and I looked around and I really don't remember why, but at the last minute I decided that no, I would stay home and go to LSU. I graduated in accounting and then went on to law school at LSU. Graduated in 1965 and I went to LSU Law School in the fall of '65. We were still a very conservative and kind of out of the loop place in some respects. Our colleague Camille Gravel was a Democratic National Committeeman, as you know, when John Kennedy was elected. And so I knew Mr. Gravel and was interested in Kennedy, and he was assassinated when I was in college. And I can still remember walking across the parade ground at LSU in front of the Campanile when I heard the news that Kennedy had been shot. And of course, he was not very well liked in the South at the time, but I admired him and thought very much of him. And it was, that was the time of a lot of civil rights activity. In fact, I managed to get arrested when I was at LSU for being in a black nightclub, which was an interesting experience in Plaquemines Parish. But so times they were a changing. But in Baton Rouge, we hadn't gotten to the flower child, or any of that stuff yet. I was on law review at LSU, and when I went, I had scored well on the aptitude test, but I didn't know what to expect. And so I worked really hard the first year that I was at law school and had learned in undergraduate school from others how to brief a case and that sort of thing, and did well as a freshman. Finished right at the top of the class, and was kind of proud of that and liked the way it felt, and so I continued to work hard and was on law review and eventually became editor-in-chief of the law review at LSU. I did know that I was going to go into business. I felt like after having gone through the agony of majoring in accounting, that was a natural thing, that tax law and business law were areas to which I would kind of naturally gravitate, and I did. I was drafted. I went to work for Stone Pigment in New Orleans, knowing that I was going to have to report to active duty. And I was very fortunate in that, like Bill Clinton, right before I had to report for active duty, I was admitted to the Louisiana National Guard. So I did not have to go to Vietnam. I was able to stay in the States, and in fact stay in the state during that service. I loved Stone Pigman. It was a great place to work. Phil Whitman, who's still practicing today, was kind of my mentor, and I did a lot of work with Phil. First case that I ever was involved in New Orleans was an antitrust trial, which was fun, and case involving the heirs of Pierre Leon Burris, which involved the mineral rights to most of the marshland around the mouth of the Mississippi River, which was another very fun case to be involved in federal court. And I did some running up and down the roads to Burris to prepare and pick up witnesses and things, and you know, that was an interesting experience. Yeah, at Stone Pigman I got a very diverse exposure to the law, including, you know, some tact. I mean, they weren't bashful about the assignments that they would give you. You know, they'd range everything from tax law to antitrust cases to, you know, that big property case that I mentioned. I think that it's wonderful for people to be specialized and know their area backwards and forwards, and that may be the most efficient thing for the client. In a smaller community like Alexandria, and to a degree New Orleans even at the time, I think that learning the general practice of law is the greatest experience that any lawyer can have, because if you don't know what's going on in the other areas, you can't be complete in your own. People that have never tried cases, when they're working on contracts, I don't think see all the things that you see if you've been in litigation over a contract. So I'm a great proponent of broad exposure, certainly in the early years of a lawyer's experience. As you know, I love to play golf, and after I'd been in New Orleans about 6 months, I decided that I would go play golf. And so I knew that you had to have a tee time in New Orleans, so I called the City Park Golf Course and told the fellow that answered the phone that I wanted to make a tee time to play golf on the weekend. And he said, well, what day did I prefer? And I told him, well, I thought Saturday. And he said, well, what time did you have in mind? And I said, well, any time between about 9 and 11 would be good. And he says, okay, I got something right here at 10:15. That'll be on the 23rd of the month. And this was,
what day of the month
this was the first week of the month. So right then I began to think that maybe living in New Orleans was not something that I was really going to be keen on. I like the outdoors. I like playing golf. The things I liked about New Orleans, I love the work. I love the food. You know, I love the city, but I really didn't think I wanted to live there. And so I had been contacted by Camille Gravel and Ledoux Provosti and George Hall, all about the possibility of coming back to Alexandria at some time. And the Christmas season, I guess, of 1970, I was in Alexandria, and George and Hall and Pappy Little talked me into coming back, and I told them that I would come. And between then and the end of January, when I had decided that I would move, or the 1st of March, when George Hall died at age 48 of a heart attack. And that was just, you know, cataclysmic for that firm then called Gold, Hall, and Sky. Leo Gold, George Hall, and Billy Sky. And George dies, and Billy, who was always hard to get along with, left. So it was George and Harry Hamill and Pappy Little and 2 or 3 other guys. And so here I was coming in, and I didn't know what really to expect. But as it turned out, may he rest in peace, George's death was, you know, there was a silver lining in that cloud, and it was for me, because so many of George's clients needed help, and they needed people to do things that I might not have been able to do if I had just come into a firm that was fully staffed. So again, I just kind of got thrown into it and went from there. I did a variety of work. I worked on commercial cases. The first case I ever handled in Alexandria was a dog bite case in which Mike Walder's son, Tommy, who's now a prominent plaintiff's lawyer here in town, was bitten by Ray Bradford's dog while Tommy was riding his bicycle. And of course, Mike wanted Ray Bradford put in jail for this offense and got himself appointed like a special city attorney to prosecute the case. And Ray Bradford hired Chris, Roy, and I to defend him. There was a criminal statute, and Chris and I undertook the defense. Unfortunately for the city and for Mike and Tommy, after we examined the statute closely, what we determined was that it made it criminal for the dog to bite, but it didn't really address the responsibility of the owner. And so we were able to have the case thrown out by Judge George Foote in the Alexandria City Court at the time. Chris knew some Latin phrase, which I should have known but didn't, that said, no crime without punishment, no punishment without crime. And I learned then that you did need to know Latin because it might come in useful in your career. We worked at the Gold firm off of one of the two really critical principles, I think, one of which Leo Gold brought, and Pappy and the other men behind him carried on, and that was to give folks as much responsibility as they could handle and put them in there and let them be as good as they could be. And I think that fostered a culture of people willing and wanting to take on difficult assignments and being able to prove themselves and go at as fast a pace as they could go, knowing that everybody else would support them and help them. The other principle that I think I brought that everybody bought into was something I learned from Saul Stone at Stone Pigment, and that was that ability would overcome contacts in every legal situation. And I think Saul Stone was right. If you're smart and you work hard, you're going to do better than the fellow that's just there because he knows somebody. And those, we never worried about who you were in our hiring practices or who you knew or whether you could bring business. The question was, did you work hard? Did you have the ability to do the work? And were you willing to get in there and do it and support other people that were like you? And I think that's what resulted in our firm being what it is today. I don't know if I can point to one thing of which I am most proud. I think certainly the most difficult from the standpoint of statewide accomplishment was the 4-year LSUA campaign, because that took years and lots of other people and legislative action. So that was significant. I'm proud in a different kind of way for some of the things we did with the Citizens Summit for Justice Reform that I did when I was president of the bar. We had meetings all around the state, and then finally a big summit where we adopted things that really came from the people that they thought might be good to do in the law, including some law reform that has happened, like permitting jurors to take notes and some real fundamental kind of things, but stuff that came from the folks, came from the real people that deal with the law in a different way than us lawyers do. I've had a great career. I've had a very full career. I've met wonderful people. The law's been good to me. You know, if I never did another thing, I'd be content. But I think I still have some more to do.